Welcome back to another Before You Read lecture for our a series investigating friendship in the Bible. For our last assignment, we looked at the Gospels and looked at the life of Jesus and his final discourse in the Gospel of John and the way that he's portrayed in the middle section of the Gospel of Luke, almost as a test case for what friendship looked like in the life of Jesus. What was Jesus like as a friend? What did friendship look like for Jesus? And for this week's lecture, we're moving in a similar direction. We're going to consider the relationship between David and Jonathan as a test case for friendship. What do these two people, these two individuals, their relationship together, what does it teach us about friendship, about the nature of friendship, maybe even about the pitfalls of friendship? To begin, we'll focus our attention on a selection from 1 Samuel. Again, I've been selective in order to sort of narrow and contract the amount of reading that I'm asking you to do. You're obviously welcome to read more broadly than the assignment that I've suggested. But for this week, I'm inviting you to read 1 Samuel chapters 13 through 14, and then chapters 18 through 20, and then finally chapter 23. I hope in the end that sort of breakdown will make sense insofar as it's focusing our attention on David and his relationship with Jonathan, or vice versa, however you would go. And so we are hopping around a bit in 1 Samuel, but we will focus on David and Jonathan. Next, I thought it would be helpful to give just a very brief sort of recap or overview of 1 Samuel. Some have already read 1 Samuel in this Reading the Bible Together series. Others, it might be a good idea to have a refresher. So 1 Samuel is part of the books known as 1 and 2 Samuel in the Old Testament. It marks a transitional period in the people of Israel's existence. You might remember that after the Exodus, after the people of Israel were set free from their slavery in Egypt and made their way to the Promised Land, that for a good number of years, the land of Israel was led by judges. We might think of them as sort of tribal leaders who there could be multiples in existence. There was never necessarily a single chief or a single tribal leader. Rather, there was a confederacy of tribes with their individual leaders. And the book of Judges gives us a testament to that, a view into that time in the history of Israel. And from the perspective of Judges, it was not a great time. The end of Judges ends famously with the idea that in that time, everybody did according to their own wishes and desires. It was sort of a chaotic free-for-all. We might liken it to the wild, wild west of modern westerns. And so 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel mark this transition from the age of the judges to the age of the monarchy. And of course, the first king in Israel is Saul, King Saul. And the second king, the more famous of the two probably, is David. And so a lot of 1 Samuel marks this transition from the time of the judges to the beginning of the reign of Saul, and eventually to the demise of Saul, his downfall, and the sort of a parallel rise of David. So there's a lot of stuff going on between David and Saul throughout 1 Samuel. They have an interesting relationship, let's put it that way. Some scholars wonder if the sort of overall purpose or function of 1 Samuel doesn't serve as a sort of propaganda piece for David, or at least the defense of David's rule and his rise to the throne. David could be perceived as a sort of younger upstart, a person who usurped power rather than was given power or was called by God, as 1 Samuel will say about David. And so others suggest, no, that's not what this book is about at all. It's just giving us a sort of transition of power. But it's important to recognize that tension between David and Saul, and especially around David's rise to power and the fall of Saul. One of the other things that's of note is that David has this very weird relationship with Saul's family. He marries one of Saul's daughters, and he's really close and good friends with Saul's son Jonathan. And so there's this embeddedness of David with the family of Saul. I'm sure a contemporary psychologist or counselor would love to dive deep into the family systems that is Saul's family, but that's a topic for another day. And so David's embeddedness with Saul's family, that's part of the relationship with Jonathan. That's an overtone, that's an aspect of the relationship that we might consider as we consider their friendship. And throughout 1 Samuel, you're sort of wrestling with, is David a villain or a hero? Is he a complex character? Does he have character flaws? What are his strengths and what are his weaknesses? And I think from a narrative perspective, Jonathan really brings that out. Jonathan really brings out both the desirable qualities of David and some of his less than desirable qualities as well. Because we're reading narrative again, I want to recap just a few of the things that I said in our last video lecture about narrative and how to go about reading narrative effectively. And so remember, the broad idea is that stories do something more than just entertain, more than just inform. They have the capacity to create a world in which the audience can inhabit and maybe even see their own world differently. They might be moving emotionally. They might transport a reader to an imaginary place in the sense that it's a place that that audience or that reader has never inhabited in real life, but can do so through the act of reading, whether reading themselves in quiet or being read to out loud, as would have been the case in the ancient world. And I introduced some sort of big picture items to consider from the field of narrative criticism, narrative biblical criticism. And just again, I think these will be helpful to sort of tease out the nature of the relationship between Jonathan and David in this part of 1 Samuel. So what is the ordering and sequencing of events? How long do they last? What happens first? What happens next? What is the role of conflict? Where do you see conflict in the narrative, and what is conflict doing? Third, pay attention to the characters and the ways in which they are given characterization through their acts and through their words. What kinds of characters do we have? How is Saul compared to Jonathan compared to David, right? That would be a really important thing for us to pay attention to. Fourth, pay attention to the point of view of the storyteller, especially. Is our storyteller an objective storyteller? Is he or she writing with a particular interest in mind? Fifth, pay attention to the settings. Where do these actions, where do these stories take place? Are they all happening in the same place? Do they happen in a variety of places? Is there any significance to those settings? And then finally, pay attention to symbolism and irony. Symbolism especially is a good one. What's the deeper meaning of these stories? So what are the deeper, deeper significance of these actions or these words would be a thing for us to consider. Finally, to return to our standard questions, again, taking the relationship between Jonathan and David as a test case, I think, might have some things to say about what is friendship like? What is a friend like? What are the characteristics of friends or friendship? Likewise, what is friendship for, right? What is the relationship between Jonathan and David tell us about the purpose of a friend or the purpose of friendship? And thirdly, how, if at all, does God relate to friendship? Is there any indication, any clue in the text about how God relates to the relationship between Jonathan and David? And then finally, that fill in the blank, right? According to 1 Samuel, friendship is blank, right? Fill in the blank. That would be another way forward. All right, so David and Jonathan, perhaps some of the clearest examples of friends in the Old Testament. Or maybe not. Maybe there will be aspects of their relationship that we don't qualify as friendship. But I think that we will have a good discussion of them, and I hope that this lecture has given you a couple of good frameworks for engaging this material from 1 Samuel. Now, happy reading.